This is why I think Jalen Hurts is going to be able to bounce back for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024, because last year it was so awful what transpired coming off that magical Super Bowl run in which Jalen Hurts emerged as a top 5 quarterback, the runner-up to MVP behind Patrick Mahomes. He played so well in that Super Bowl game against Kansas City, in which he accounted for nearly 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. You thought that he was going to be able to continue that ascent. But we have to take a look at what happened last year, because it was inexcusable. It was tough to watch. There was a lack of creativity, a lack of adjustments that should not happen at the NFL level. Brian Johnson is to blame, but also Nick Sirianni is to blame. There was also a lack of explosion and consistency for this Eagles offense last year as well. Eagles offensive woes, these analytics, all this data, per our friends at Sharp Football Analysis, in 2022, the Eagles averaged 9.5 air yards per attempt in the first half, 2.67 seconds to throw. 30% of Jalen Hurts' attempts came when he was holding the ball for 3+ seconds. There was a 30% pressure rate and a 17% mark of throws that were at or behind the line of scrimmage. In 2023, air yards per attempt went down to 7.5. Seconds to throw went up. 39% of attempts came when Jalen Hurts had to hold the ball for 3+ seconds, and there was a 39% pressure rate. 25% of his throws were at or behind the line of scrimmage. So to summarize those issues for Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense, the Eagles threw the ball much shorter, weren't as explosive of an offensive unit. Jalen Hurts had ample time to throw because he held onto the ball longer, but sometimes that was a problem because this offense lacked rhythm and flow, and Jalen Hurts was pressured more last year as compared to 2022. And speaking of the explosive plays downfield, what made Jalen Hurts so dynamic in 2022? The vertical pass game and the deep ball accuracy. Whether he was taking the top off of the defense to A.J. Brown or popping the lid to Devontae Smith, the seam ball was on point as well. Quez Watkins got in on the action a couple of times. Yes, he did. And I'm not a big Quez Watkins fan. But look at how the deep passes decreased from 2022 to 2023. In 2022, 0.44 EPA per attempt, success rate 38%, 14.9 yards per attempt. In 2023, 0.06 EPA per attempt, an 18% success rate, and 8.3 yards per attempt. Yards per attempt nearly getting cut in half should never, ever happen. And then the Eagles also ran this methodical and mundane offense, which lacked modern-day concepts, and they were 32nd in pre-snap motion, as I mentioned. But instead of throwing the ball vertically, a Jalen Hurts strength, they didn't trust Jalen Hurts enough, nor did Brian Johnson. Passes behind the line of scrimmage. In 2022, 20% of the Eagles' passes behind the line of scrimmage, 6.4 yards per attempt. And in 2023, 28% of passes were behind the line of scrimmage, and the yards per attempt went down to 5.3. And then in speaking of this Eagles rhythm and flow, consistency, part of the reason why everything appeared to be hard, everything appeared to be sluggish, was because the Eagles lacked offensive pace. Brian Johnson was slow to get play calls in, and then because of that, the Eagles got to the line late. And then because of that, Jalen Hurts didn't have as much time to read what the defense was doing, make the correct audibles. But then within that offense, what happened? There was a lack of hot routes, the lack of sight adjustments, the lack of pre-snap motion. And none of those things did favors for Jalen Hurts. And you look at these offensive pace numbers here. In 2022, Eagles running plays every 25.9 seconds. That was number 1 in the National Football League. In 2023, it goes up by 4 seconds to 29.7. And that was number 25 among 32 teams in tempo. And lastly, let me round out with why I think that Hurts can improve upon those numbers from last year and bounce back here in 2024. 5 reasons why I think Jalen Hurts can bounce back from a rough ending to the 2023 season and make a big turnaround in 2024. First, the switch up in offensive coordinator. Brian Johnson had no experience calling plays at the NFL level, and now Jalen Hurts has Kellen Moore designing and calling plays, and he's consistently had top 5, top 10 offenses that have been high-octane units in the National Football League. Even though Jason Kelce retired, the Philadelphia Eagles still have an elite offensive line. I think the addition of Saquon Barkley is going to help Jalen Hurts because it makes the Eagles' offense less predictable. Now when Philadelphia runs that run-pass option, the RPO, and they have a couple of different looks off of that, it's going to help Jalen Hurts as a runner and a passer, him coming off that knee injury. Now that he's fully healthy, I think he's going to be more dynamic in running the football. Philadelphia still has a loaded supporting cast with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And then lastly, we have seen Jalen Hurts be a great quarterback in this league when he finished runner-up for MVP during the 2022 campaign when the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl. So those are 5 reasons right there why I think Hurts is going to be able to bounce back during the 2024 campaign. And I'm a believer in this Eagles team reemerging as one of the top teams in the NFL. So once again, we pop up this poll question here. If you think Hurts is a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. If not, comment why. Don't forget to give me a follow on social media. I'm on X at Chase_Senior. I'm on Instagram at Chase_Senior. Don't be a stranger. Reach out, say what's up. And as always, go Birds. Here's the ESPN write-up on Hurts being an honorable mention. So right on the cusp of being inside that top 10. After a year 3 star turn that garnered a Super Bowl appearance and a $255 million contract, Hurts' play dipped last year. His QBR ranking fell from 4th, 68.3, to 12th, 60.1. His 15 interceptions were so uncharacteristic that the total nearly matched that of his first 3 years combined, 18. A knee injury that he tried his best to manage clearly affected him, according to several evaluators. He was playing hurt, an NFL executive said. The Eagles tried to downplay that, but he didn't look right. He wasn't the same runner he was in the past, and passing the ball was tough for him. Added an AFC scout. He'll always be in that 7 to 12 range, depending on how productive he is each year. Also of note, the Eagles' offense became stale as a whole, according to a high-ranking NFL team official, and the predictable offensive attack affected Hurts' stock, which allows us to segue perfectly to this graphic here to my right. The Eagles' offensive issues that we saw last year under offensive coordinator Brian Johnson. It was despicable, it was disgusting, it was ugly to watch. It was unacceptable. The lack of preparedness, the lack of evolution, the lack of creativity, the lack of adjustments throughout the year. Nick Sirianni is to blame for some of this, but Brian Johnson had no feel as a play caller, had no experience calling plays at the NFL level. It showed. And situationally, he was subpar. Within this Eagles offensive scheme, there were a lack of hot routes, didn't do Jalen Hurts any favors, no sight adjustments to switch the eye level for Hurts or for the defense. The Eagles failed to commit to the running game. DeAndre Swift was so dynamic, but he had only a couple of games in which he had 20-plus carries. And to not give him the ball more when the Eagles were struggling to throw the ball, that's unacceptable. The Eagles were 32nd among 32 teams in pre-snap motion. How does that happen in this creative evolution of offensive football that we see in this era? And Brian Johnson was clearly in over his skis.